This learning is Le'ili Nishmas Broya Bas Chananya, Mesechus Demai, Perek Mishna Tes. Ma'asrin Mishal Yisrael Al Shal Nachri. A person could separate maisrus from produce that they received or bought from a yid. If this produce is tevel, they could separate maisrus from this produce that they received from the yid for produce that they received from a guy, because the Tana of our Mishnah holds that land in Eretz Yisrael, even if it's owned by a guy, it's chayiv in trumas and maisrus. And so when a person receives or buys produce from a guy, they need to separate maisrus from it. And the Tana is teaching that if a person has produce from a yid, that they know that it's tevel, they could separate maisrus from that produce for the produce that they received from a guy. And mishal nachri al shal Yisrael, and so too a person could separate maisrus from produce that they received from a guy for the produce that they received from a yid, if that produce that they received from the yid is tevel. The Tana continues, Mishal Yisrael al shal kutim. A person could also separate maisrus from produce that they receive from a yid when they know that that produce is tevel for the produce that they received or bought from a kuti. So, as we learned in the past, the kutim were people who converted. They were mizgayer out of fear, and there's a question whether it's a real gear or not. Now, our Tana holds that it was a real gear. They're real yidden. However, everyone agrees that they weren't careful with all the mitzvahs. Now, even though they were careful to separate maisrus, nevertheless, they were not careful when it came to giving produce to others. When they gave produce to others, they would not separate the maisrus. And so we could be certain and assume that any produce received from a kuti is tevel, and so therefore a person could separate maisrus from tevel that they received from a yid for any produce that they received from a kuti. And so too, mishal kutim, al shal kutim, one can separate maisrus from produce that they receive from one kuti for the produce that they receive from a different kuti. Because like we said, we assume that any produce that a kuti gives to someone else or sells to someone else is tevel. And the Mishnah concludes with an opinion that argues with this. Rabbi Eliezer Eiser Mishal Kutin Al Shal Kutin. Rabbi Eliezer forbids. He says it's osir to separate maisrus from produce that a person received from one kuti for produce that a person received from a different kuti. And the reason for this is because it's possible that the kuti planned to keep the produce for himself and he separated the maisrus, and only afterwards he decided to sell it. So therefore, a person cannot separate maisrus from produce they receive from one kuti for produce that they receive from a different kuti, because it's possible that one of them already had the maisrus separated from it.